Mr Speaker, I move that the following cognate bills be now introduced. An Act to appropriate out of the Consolidated Fund sums for the services of the government for the year 2022-2023 and to make an additional appropriation to give effect to budget variations for the year 2021-2022. An Act to appropriate out of the Consolidated Fund a sum for the services of the Legislature for the year 2022-2023. And an Act to make miscellaneous amendments to certain state revenue legislation in connection with the budget for the financial year 2022-2023 and for other purposes.
The question is that the bills now be introduced. All those of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Mr Speaker, I bring up the bills, electronic copies of which have been provided to the clerk. Mr Speaker, I move that these bills now be read a second time.
Thank you, Treasurer.
Thank you, Tom. Mr Speaker, I'd first like to acknowledge that we meet on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Mr Speaker, this budget is about reform. Reform to give our children the best start to life. Reform to make owning your own home easier to achieve. And reform to break the barriers to women's opportunity in this state. This government believes that there is always a better future if we choose to reach for it. And in this budget, we make that choice. We choose to invest in transformational reform to build a better, brighter future for everyone across this state. Mr Speaker, over the past few years, the people of our state have written a story of strength and resilience, a story about the determination of our farmers during drought, the courage of our firefighters, the resilience of our flood-affected communities, and the character, creativity and care of so many during COVID. Parents, business owners, frontline workers, and everyone who helped keep us safe and keep us going. Time and time again, the New South Wales people rose to the challenges and showed that nothing is out of their reach. Throughout, the New South Wales government has stood with the people of this state. We committed $53 billion alongside the Commonwealth during COVID-19 to keep our people safe, our businesses open, and our workers in work. Today, we are seeing the dividends of that investment. More people are in jobs today than before COVID-19 arrived. Unemployment is at the historically low level of 4%. Gross state product is now forecast to grow at 4.25% for the next financial year, much higher than was previously forecast. But while the state's economy has rebounded strongly from the Delta and Omicron waves, the aftershocks of the pandemic continue to challenge. And this government is again standing with the people of New South Wales. Mr Speaker, inflation is high right across the world because of global supply chain constraints and economic disruption caused by the pandemic. This has been exacerbated by Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. We understand that rising inflation is not simply a statistic. It is something that is impacting the daily household costs of millions of Australians and reducing what they can afford. That's why we're committing over $7.2 billion next financial year to boost family budgets. We're providing $520 million in new toll relief over 2 years, saving drivers up to $750 a year. We are helping eligible households save up to $600 a year on their power bills by installing rooftop solar and efficient appliances. We're helping families with a back-to-school voucher of $150 per child to help with the cost of school supplies for Term 1 next year. Mr Speaker, we're also supporting our teachers, our nurses and other public sector workers by increasing their remuneration by 3% a year for the next 2 years, providing amongst the highest public sector wage growth anywhere in the country. And we're recognising the special contribution of our state's health workers during the pandemic through a $3,000 acknowledgement payment. Mr Speaker, These measures will help people across our state deal with the increased costs that they're seeing in their lives as a result of global inflation. However, inflation is not the only lingering impact of the virus. We're also experiencing the health aftershocks of the pandemic. COVID-19 presentations to our hospitals, the first real flu season in 3 years, and a backlog of elective surgery, just to name a few. That's why we're investing a record $5.4 billion over the next 4 years in our health workforce. This is an historic commitment that will see us add an additional 10,000 health workers to bolster our health system. This will ease the pressure on staff, clear the elective surgery backlog, and make sure we provide the very best quality end-of-life care. Every person should be treated with dignity and care, whether it's their first day or their last. This government also continues to stand with our flood-affected communities. Earlier this year, we saw some of the worst floods in our country's history. We are partnering with the Commonwealth Government to invest $3.5 billion to rebuild those communities and support our people as they recover. Mr. Speaker, this is a government that believes in strong financial management. Not so the people of New South Wales can help the budget, but so the budget can help the people of our state in times of need. But we also understand the importance of ensuring that the budget returns to surplus over the medium term to rebuild our fiscal buffers and honour our covenant to future generations. That's the story of this budget. For 2021-2022, we estimate a budget deficit of $16.6 billion, improving to a deficit of $11.3 billion in 22-23 as we navigate the after effects of COVID-19 and the floods. In last year's budget, we projected a return to surplus in 24-25. We held to that projection in the half-yearly review, notwithstanding the Delta outbreak. And despite Omicron, inflation and floods, today the government is handing down a budget that continues to project a return to surplus in 24-25, a surplus which grows to $1.4 billion in 25-26. We project that net debt will stabilise at around 14% of GSP by June 2026, a decline gradually over the second half of the decade. This is despite the worst economic shock since the Great Depression, historically high inflation, increasing costs of borrowing and record floods. Our return to surplus over the medium term is supported by $2 billion of budget improvement measures over the next 4 years. This includes legislation to increase the foreign investor surcharge land tax and align the rates of betting tax and the point of consumption tax at 15%. The people of New South Wales know that it is only a coalition government that understands the value of taxpayer money and can deliver a strong economic and fiscal management needed for a strong and prosperous New South Wales. But Mr. Speaker, our covenant to future generations is about more than merely leaving them with the finances in good shape. It's also about investing today so that they may enjoy the returns of a more prosperous tomorrow. This is something our government has always understood. We're an infrastructure government. Over the past 10 years, we've invested more than $178 billion in building infrastructure to improve the lives of the people of this state. Mr. Speaker, we're transforming our state through roads and rail. Over the next 4 years, we expect to invest a record $112.7 billion in the state's infrastructure pipeline. We are building the Western Harbour Tunnel, extending the M6, upgrading the Great Western Highway and building a metro network for Sydney. And this budget, we get started on stage 2 of the Parramatta Light Rail and faster rail between Sydney, Newcastle and the Central Coast. These projects and other nation-building projects that we are delivering are the arteries of the nation. They will reduce travel times and support our people in spending more time at home with their families or at work applying their skills and talents. We're also investing in our schools and hospitals, delivering in this budget 23 new schools, and 23 new and upgraded schools, 30 new ambulance stations, and continuing to build or upgrade 45 new hospitals. But Mr. Speaker, if our state is to reach its fullest potential, then we must invest in more than just bricks and steel. We must invest in our people as well. The central belief of our country is that every person is entitled to the dignity of their humanity and that they are of value and have value to add. Its great promise is that every person, no matter who they are, will have the opportunity to contribute, prosper, and pursue their hopes and dreams. This should not only be the starting principle of our politics, it should also be the common sense of our commerce. Our economy has grown from the creativity, talent, and determination of our people. It was our people that built our factories and farms. It was our people who contributed to the wonders of modern science. It was our people who first saw in their imaginations the cities that we see before us now. There is no better investment that we can make for the people of this state than investing in the people of this state themselves. Mr. Speaker, in this budget, we do just that by investing in the aspirations of women right across New South Wales. Last year, following the courageous advocacy of Brittany Higgins and Grace Tame, we saw an outpouring of frustration and calls for change from women right across the country. I've heard stories of women taking the long way home to avoid dimly lit streets when they leave work after dark. I've heard stories of female managers getting paid less than their male colleagues who report to them. I've heard stories of women's ideas being overlooked in the workplace, only for those same ideas to be embraced when suggested by a man. I saw women listening to Grace Tame and Brittany Higgins, and many other women who have shared their experiences since then, nodding in agreement. These are not isolated experiences. They are the everyday experience of millions of Australian women. Mr. Speaker, the women of New South Wales are some of the most highly educated anywhere in the world. Yet the workforce participation rate for women is 9% lower than the participation rate for men. It's an economic imperative that we respect, hear, and empower women in the workplace because their brilliance, contribution, and creativity are things that we should all be backing. By lifting workplace participation rate of women so that it is equal to that of men, we can grow our economy so that it's 8% larger by 2060. This is the equivalent of increasing the average income of every household in this state by $22,000 per year. This is an economic opportunity that we cannot ignore. Mr. Speaker, being safe and healthy is the first step to participating in our workforce. It is also a basic right which everyone in modern New South Wales should enjoy. That's why in this budget, we will invest around $100 million over 4 years in women's safety to help victim survivors leave domestic and family violence and to stop the harassment of women at work and on our streets. We are also investing in women's health with $80 million to support women to access affordable fertility treatments and $40 million to improve the healthcare of women experiencing menopause. However, Mr. Speaker, the transformational opportunity to increase women's workforce participation is affordable and accessible childcare. Even though we see similar numbers of men and women joining the workforce after completing their education, women's participation rates begin to drop below men's in their late 20s and never recover to the same level. For many Australian women, this is because they make the choice to leave the workforce to care for their children. However, for too many women, that's a choice that's made for them. Many Australians cannot access childcare, and too many women only take home about 30 cents in each dollar that they earn after taking account of the tax they pay, the loss of family tax benefits, and the costs of childcare. That's why almost half of Australian women currently seeking work report that caring for children is the main reason they're unable to start a job or work more hours. These structures are as a result of a bygone era where a household was made up of a male breadwinner and a female homemaker. Mr. Speaker, In providing affordable, accessible childcare, we can build a state where a person's prospects are governed not by their expectations of the past, but by their hopes and dreams for the future. Over the next 10 years, we'll invest $5 billion to expand to high-quality, affordable childcare in those areas of the state where access to childcare is the biggest barrier to parents returning to work. We will provide competitive funding to providers to expand the number of affordable childcare places available to families in our state, saving eligible families thousands of dollars each year. This is not just the right thing to do by the women and families of New South Wales, it's a future-focused economic reform also. We estimate that these reforms, when delivered alongside the childcare commitments of the Commonwealth Government, will, within a decade, see up to 95,000 women enter the workforce or take on more hours, reduce the female participation gap by up to 14%, and grow our economy by up to $17.1 billion per year. Investing in women is an investment that this government believes will pay off, and it's an investment that we're proud to make. Mr. Speaker, we're also proud in this budget to make an unparalleled investment in our First Nations people. I started this speech by acknowledging that we are on Aboriginal land and paying my respects to elders past, present and emerging, where respect is honoured in deeds as well as words. In this budget, we commit $716 million to empower our First Nations people. We will fund programs designed in partnership with First Nations communities to support their children and young people, improve their health and well-being, and expand Aboriginal child and family centres. These programs will not just improve the lives of the people that they touch, but they are also the just and right thing to do. Mr. Speaker, our children are our future, and a great education can set them up for life. In this budget, we take our lead from the millions of Australian families who have transformed their prospects from one generation to the next by investing in their children's education, and I say that looking at my parents. A great education can propel a person up the ladder of opportunity, and it is through a great education that we expand our minds, see possibilities that we didn't even know existed, and obtain the skills and tools that help us build a better life. Mr. Speaker, we know that the first 5 years of a child's life can set them up for success at school and beyond. In fact, 90% of a child's brain development occurs in those years. In this budget, we're investing an initial $5.8 billion over 10 years to establish a year of universal pre-kindergarten in the year before school, and investing over $280 million over 4 years to support our workforce of early childhood educators to make this reform a reality. We're also investing $1.3 billion over 4 years to make preschool more affordable for families, including by providing $2,000 of support per child to access preschool services in long daycare from the beginning of next year. Mr. Speaker, a family's wealth should not determine the wealth of their child's opportunity. Mr. Speaker, the reality is that our children's lives, the New South Wales, our children will build, will be brighter because of the once-in-a-generation investment that we decide to make right here today. Mr. Speaker, the largest single investment that most families make is in their home. Our homes are where we raise our families, share time with our friends, and live so much of our lives. Housing security is not only the bedrock of economic security, but also the foundation to a good life as well. That is why we will give first home buyers the choice of paying an annual property tax instead of stamp duty. Providing our young people with this choice will cost the budget over $729 million over the next 4 years, but save them years of waiting to achieve their aspirations of home ownership. We will invest $780 million over 2 years in a shared equity scheme for our single parents, our key workers, and our vulnerable older citizens who do not have a partner to share the cost with. Our belief in the importance of these measures is grounded in an understanding that when you own your own home, you own a stake in the future of our country. But housing security is more than just about home ownership. It's also about ensuring that our state always has the supply of quality homes required to meet the needs of our people. Nearly $750 million in this budget will go towards unlocking hundreds of thousands of homes across our state, including in our regional and rural communities where they're needed most. And it's also about ensuring that the most vulnerable people in our community have a safe place to live. We will invest more than $550 million to maintain and grow our social housing, as well as housing for our First Nations people. We choose to make these investments because we know that ensuring that every person in New South Wales has a place to call home will make New South Wales a better home for all of us. Mr. Speaker, your opportunity in life shouldn't be determined by where you live. That's why we're expanding our investment into the regions, increasing the Regional Growth Fund by more than $1.3 billion. Mr. Speaker, this year's budget includes $230 million to support tourism in the bush and more than $390 million to develop the Snowy Mountains Special Activation Precinct to establish a year-round tourism destination. Tourism brings the city and the bush closer together, but it also diversifies our local economies as well. We're investing $130 million over 5 years to expand our critical minerals industry, creating the jobs of the future with the resources of the future to help build the future. These investments come on top of our record $2.4 billion regional health investment to make sure our regional communities can always access quality healthcare. And they will be further supported by our commitment to clear the backlog of key worker housing in the bush. No community should miss out on a police officer or a teacher because there is no place for them to live. Mr. Speaker, time and time again, modern science has expanded the frontiers of what we can achieve. We saw during the pandemic the power of medical science. We are free and safe today because our best and brightest developed vaccines in record time. The great quest of the human mind to understand our world has unlocked opportunity after opportunity and created job after job. The reality is that many of the jobs and industries of the future haven't even been thought of yet. But in this budget, we make sure that many of them will be thought of right here in New South Wales. We're investing $1 billion to build the laboratories and testing rooms where our scientists, doctors and engineers will design the blueprints of a better, more prosperous economy. It's also why we'll invest in their designs, their projects and their products. $142 million in this budget will go towards the research and development of our most promising ideas. And $342 million will help carry those ideas across the so-called Valley of Death, which so many startups struggle to traverse, to where they can become the goods and services that will radically improve our lives. Through these investments, through these commitments, we invest in the potential of our ideas to expand the potential of our people. Mr. Speaker, New South Wales has the potential to become a renewable energy superpower. We may be a sun-burnt country, but we're also a sun-blessed country. Our state's sun and wind can deliver us some of the cheapest, cleanest, and most reliable energy anywhere in the world. And this will free us from our dependency on ageing power stations and from shocks of the global energy markets. But only if we choose to realise that potential. Mr. Speaker, climate change is an intergenerational challenge which requires a once-in-a-generation response. Our state, our generation, are doing exactly that. We're on track to reduce our emissions by 50% by 2030 on 2005 levels and to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. These commitments are not just about avoiding more record bushfires, droughts and floods, but also about underwriting our prosperity as our trading partners go to the green goods of the future. This is why we will make a record $1.2 billion investment to establish our transmission acceleration facility, which will help to catalyse at least $14 billion of private investment to carry energy from our renewable energy zones, modern day power stations, to our businesses and our homes. This investment will fast-track our electricity infrastructure roadmap, the cross-party reform that this Parliament passed to modernise our electricity infrastructure and ensure New South Wales can be a leader in a low-carbon world. Mr. Speaker, we have an obligation to protect our planet. We do not own our natural environment. We merely hold it from the past for the future. That's why we're investing $424 million over 4 years to improve and protect our national parks, and $206 million over 10 years to reward farmers for reducing their carbon emissions, enhancing and protecting biodiversity on their land, whilst improving the productivity of their farms. From the beaches on our coast to the snowy mountains in our south, from the outback to our rainforest, our natural environment defines who we are. It is in our culture, it is in our way of life, and it is one of the reasons why we choose to live where we do. If we are truly to build a brighter future for our state, we must pass our environment to the next generation in better shape than the way we found it. And in this budget, that's what we're determined to do. Mr. Speaker, budgets are about the choices you make. In this budget, we choose to continue to stand by our people and take on the reforms that will unleash the full potential of our state. We choose to lift the horizon on hope. We choose to harness the wonders of modern science and the power of our wind and our sun. We choose to leave our planet a better planet for future generations. We choose to make sure that families can continue to buy a slice of the great Australian dream. We choose to give our children the best start in life so that they can not only reach their dreams, but dream bigger in the first place. And Mr. Speaker, today we choose to make sure the little girl born today has the same opportunities and liberties in life as the little boy born in the hospital room next door, because it is their contribution and the contribution of every other person in our state that will help us reach our highest heights of what our state can be and build a better, brighter future for everyone in New South Wales. Mr. Speaker, I commend the bills to the House.